just quickly like to introduce Penang chapter members. We are a small group of 6, and I'm Lepin, chapter lead, and we have Neo, Barry, Major Dr. Prabha, Ang, and Martin. So I'd also like to take this opportunity to introduce the trainers for the PDA program. So there were 4 of us. We have our IAC president, Dr. Shan, Andy Cheong, Neo, and myself. So today I would also take this opportunity to give our acknowledgement and thanks to these 4 persons who supported the PDA program. So I would like to thank Dr. Shan and Andy for facilitating the training, doing most of the training, Grace for helping out and supporting the program, and Bileng, who's the CEO of Penang Women Development Center, for sponsoring the venue. Next. So as mentioned earlier, for today's topic is coaching skills program for Penang Deaf Association, and I would like to introduce the moderators for today's session. So Barry and Major Dr. Prabha will be moderating the session, and Neo and I will be speaking and sharing our experiences for the program. So Barry, go ahead.
Everyone, welcome to this Learning Circle session, which will discuss the Penang chapter's experience in training the Penang Deaf Association members on coaching skills. The format for this session will be in the form of an interview conducted by Prabha with Lepin and Neo as the interviewees. But before we start, let us get some context to this session. Some of you might be wondering, where on earth is Penang? Well, it is in Malaysia, and Malaysia you know because it is made famous by our present IAC president who hails from Malaysia. Penang, which is also the jewel of Malaysia, is located to the north of Malaysia, the Malaysian peninsula. And a bit of trivia, in 2016, Penang was number 6 in a list published by CNN on the world's best places to retire. So there you have it. That's Penang. The second point for context is to check your awareness of what percentage of the world's population has hearing disability. So if you take out your knowledge of your community or your interactions and all that, is it 0.5%, 1%, 3%? The answer is 5%. 466 million of the world population has hearing loss disability, of which 34 million are children. And they are present in all our communities, and they all can benefit from coaching no less than the communities that we currently serve. So introducing coaching to this part of the community becomes a very meaningful exercise, as they are often underserved with such useful soft skills. Before I hand over to Prabha, if you have any questions for Lepin and Neo during the live session, please type them on the chat and I will post them at the end of the dialogue sessions. I will now hand over to Prabha, who will discuss with Lepin and Neo their experience in conducting this workshop. Prabha?
Yep, thank you very much, Barry. Neo and Lepin, once again, congratulations. Let me start this session by asking, how did IAC Penang approach Penang Deaf Association? Maybe you can give us some overview how it all started. Yes,
sure.
Lepin.
So after successfully completing the program for the visually impaired in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, so our IAC president, Dr. Shan, had the idea of extending this program to the deaf. So he then contacted his friend, Bileng, that I mentioned earlier, who's the CEO of Penang Women Development Corporation, who then contacted PDA. Since at that time we were launching the Penang chapter, Dr. Shan thought that it will be good for us to do this CSR project. So Andy Cheong and the Penang chapter volunteered to support this project.
Wow, interesting. So the contents, let us explore what were the contents, realizing we are serving this deaf community? I'm sure the audience is interested to understand what were the contents of this entire coaching program. Maybe Neo, you would like to share your thoughts?
Sure, Prabha. Thanks. Yeah, just to add to what Leping was saying just now, actually, we were talking over lunch about this program when we were undergoing our professional coaching certification. So the content is based on the program for the certification that we do as coaches. So it covers the basics. Yeah? It covers the basics of coaching, the art and science, the framework of coaching. Then it also covers the IAC masteries for coaching. The IAC masteries talks about the skills, the masteries to be able to coach successfully, right, and effectively. Okay. Then we also went into more detail in terms some of the theory from a psychological perspective, using psychological concepts that validates the effectiveness of coaching. So we talk about psychology of coaching, we talk about emotional excellence. So that is the whole program. So we use the same content as what we planned for the certified professional coach program that we do, right? And we use the IAC material to cover the masteries that I mentioned just now. So these are the things that we have in the national language as well. There's material in the national language. However, we have to adapt part of it, because as we went through in the program, we realized that we have to find ways to make it more relevant to the participants. So there was a bit of work from Lepin and myself, going through the material again and looking at the masteries. How can we convey that message in terms of the masteries, for example, right? That in a way that the participants who are deaf are able to relate and find ways to apply the masteries that we talk about to be able to coach effectively.
Interesting. Quite a comprehensive content I see, from wide range of psychology and the mastery series and emotional intelligence. Quite a comprehensive. Lepin, would you like to add anything regarding the contents?
Yeah, of course, other than the theories that were shared, we also organized a lot of experiential learning. So we did a lot of one-on-one coaching between the coachee and also the coach as well.
Wow, interesting. And though the material, it's a generic material from wide range of subject related to coaching, realizing that we are catering the members of the deaf community, perhaps you can share how the whole program was organized in order to make it a comprehensive, a very structured program. What is your thought on that, Lepin?
Sure. So as you can see, the topics that were shared by Neil just now, we organized over 3 months, 4 weekends. So overall it's about 8 days. And we printed the materials, of course, as handouts for the participants. So initially it was all in English, but then we discovered that the participants were more well-versed in the local language. So we decided to also translate as we went along. And also how we organize it is more experiential. So of course, some theories were covered as well, but we also found that because the participants were quite new to all these things, so we decided to make it more experiential, where they can just practice more, just to get the coaching concept correct, rather than going through the whole theory. And we also shared a lot of analogies to get them to understand all these concepts.
Interesting. I like the idea of analogy. Can you tell more about it, Lepin, about the analogy?
Sure. I think like when we shared the GROW model, for example, so Neo was actually teaching that topic at the time. So he used a lot of more the analogy to give them a feeling what GROW is all about. As you know, it's just a model, and how do people actually use it? So maybe Neo can add on more to talk about the GROW model. How you
sure.
Thanks, Neo.
So yeah, as we went along, sometimes we realized that you can see on the faces of the participants, yeah, not all the messages are going through. You see the blank faces. So we realized that we have to find ways to make it relevant to them. So for example, the goal model, it talks about the goal, right? The reality where they are today, and what's the options that they have, right? And the way forward. So I just use a simple model of, when you're traveling, you have an end goal or destination in mind. Then what options do you have? Where you, first of all, you need to know where you are today, right? To start the journey. You want in a navigation system, you need to enter from where your
Right.
starting point to the end point, right? And then you do have options in terms of routes. Which one you want to choose, right? Then you move forward. So that was one of the example of the analogies that we use to them. Then we use other type of I would say navigation as well, trying to get to a certain destination, because ultimately it's about where do you want to go, right? And how do you get there? Right? So we use that, and we talk over it many times. As you mentioned, this is rather new to them actually, right? So as we talk to them, we realize this segment of community is underserved. What I meant by that is some of them is kind of the first time for them to participate in such a program, right? When we talk about soft skills training, communication training, leadership training, they have very limited opportunities, unfortunately. So there is a lot of new learning for them when they participate in this. So I would say for them, it is definitely a big challenge for them in terms of learning, because it's a lot of new things, right? As we go through, for those of us lucky to go through this program, we do have some, to a certain extent, some background, some experience. For them, some of them is completely new, right? So definitely I have to give a shout out to them, to the participants, to the interpreters. Definitely, it was not easy for them. They have a lot of processing to do in a short time, right? To learn a lot of new concepts.
Right. Yeah, please, Lepin.
Add on as well. So as Neo mentioned, we had interpreters. So Barry, if you could show the slide on the coaching session. So we had 2 interpreters to help us with that. And of course, they, like what Neo mentioned, they also have to do the interpretation. So initially when we started off, in this picture over here, we have Neo and the interpreter. So as Neo was doing the lectures, the interpreter would, sign the language for the participants. So initially, when we were doing this, we were like looking at the participants and also looking at the interpreter. So the participants told us, oh, just be natural. If you have to speak loud, the interpreter is able to sign the language, show the excitement and so on. So as you can see here, this is one of them. And the next slide would show the coaching session that we do. So we have the interpreter in the center to help to sign for the coachee as well as we are doing the experiential learning.
Interesting. Good to see Dr. Shan there. The whole idea of having interpreter is very, very interesting. We will explore that further. But let me understand from this first, if I may call it a pilot project, a very new experience, not only for the coaches, and I'm sure also for the coach and the other volunteers and stakeholders involved in this project. Can we explore to understand more what was the outcome, at least as what we know so far? Neo would like to share what, in your opinion, what was the outcome of this wonderful initiative?
Sure, Prabha. But before we get into that, if you would allow me, I'd like to go back a bit, step in terms of what was the objective that we started out with. So the whole idea, I think, is when we started, we talked about the experience of training the blind to be coaches, and then now we're exploring how we can expand coaching skills to the deaf community. Okay, so the objective that we set from the start was how can we enable these skill sets in the deaf community. So the goal that we set back then was to train them up to be a certified professional coach, right? So the participants, I believe there was a question just now. So the from the audience, thank you for that. The audience, the participants are members of the deaf community. In this particular case, because we reach out to the deaf community, and there is this PDA, right? So they selected their committee members. Basically, they are leaders in the deaf community. So, you know, it's like we want to enable these leaders who then reach out to their members and then reach out to more members, right? Okay, so this is the participants that we are talking about, right? So the goal was to enable that. So as we went along the program, so this was for 3 months over 4 weekends, right? It is became to some challenges, I would say, right? So from a few perspectives, we mentioned some of the challenges from the participants' perspective in terms of their experience and exposure, and also for us ourselves as the trainer, right? This is completely new to us, and we're trying to find ways to make it relevant to them, make it effective learning for them. So it's also new for us, and we're learning at the same time, I would say, right? The interpreters, as we mentioned, also is also processing a lot of information at the same time, right? The communication is definitely challenging for them, trying to understand when you go into, for example, the psychology theories, right? So they can't translate it directly just like that. So they have to understand the meaning, put into context, and then try to put in their own sign interpretation to the participants. So definitely there's a lot of different challenges from different perspectives. Okay, so as we went along, then we ask ourselves the question, ultimately, what is it that we want to achieve, right? So we want to enable more people to have these skill sets. So whether the certified professional coach is the end goal, or can we adapt it? So I think what we agreed was we want people to practice coaching skills. You know, as Captain Chan said, you know, we want to create this ripple through the community, one coaching conversation at a time. So that's what we did. We put more coaching, live coaching practices, you know, at least we get them to practice asking questions, have understanding and basic application of the coaching skills. So we ended up adapting that in the sense that we just want them to be equipped with that and get them to practice. So that was kind of adjustment that we did as we went along.
Wonderful.
So-
I can see the objective started with creating a professional coach. As you explore the project, as you get more feedback, as you get more experience, the objective was well adopted. And the bottom line, like what you said, one coaching conversation at a time. That is so empowering. Thanks for sharing that, Neo. Lepin, I would love to hear from your perspective.
Yes, just to add on to what Neil mentioned. So at the end, you know, we just kind of give them a certificate of attendance because it's more to expose them to the coaching culture. So I can share some examples as they went along. They were required to go out and coach someone. So that was part of the assignment to become a certified professional coach. But due to some challenges that we're going to talk a little bit later, they managed to do some of it, and we have had some success stories. So one of them shared that usually as committee members, because we have the president of the PDA, and quite a few of them are also the committee leaders. And when they usually the members will come to them and say, hey, you know, this association, what are you doing to help us as the community? So most of the time they will struggle and say, okay, you know, they try to answer the question or try to persuade them that they should be part of this association. So after learning the coaching skills, they could ask more questions instead, and they will ask back to the members and say, you know, what do you want to see from the association? What do you expect us to do? So posing back the question to them makes it more meaningful. So some of them have been practicing this. So they say, oh, good thing, it's a new idea for them. So instead of them struggling or all the time when people question them.
Very interesting. I could reflect, the art of questioning that leads to always solution-oriented and empowering the members to become part of the solution rather than focusing on the problem, right? That is so meaningful. So we spoke about the members, the coaches benefit. How about you guys, reflecting, being with this project for 3 months, and I'm sure there's a lot of work happened before and also reflecting after. Based on all this, Neo, would you like to share perhaps your own outcome? I can see you are a very reflective person.
Sure, Prabha. Where do I start? Let me see. Yeah, definitely. When we talk about, for example, the coaching skill sets, one of the masteries we talked about was listening, right? So when we talk about the deaf community, how does it apply? So it is about looking at how we apply some of the coaching skill sets differently. So like listening. So when they have this limitation, they make it up in other ways, right? So the other sense of observation are more heightened, more sensitive. So I think from some of the experiences in terms of their power of observation is definitely better, right? So, and somehow they are also, when we are in the process of coaching, one of the things that we talk about is also being focused at that point in time. So if you look at what is being shared just now, this is one of the examples that we did. So this was a session done by Andy, actually. Andy was moderating these sessions. So he did this with the participants, instead of describing it, he got them to visualize, what do you understand by the masteries, by the coaching skill sets that we're talking about. So this was a very effective method. So I brought Andy for this. This is something I learned as well. How do we then look at different ways of conveying the message? How do we look at different ways of engaging the team? How do we see other ways of applying masteries other than what we understand? So it really opens up your perspective, right? So through this approach, Andy did manage to get through to the participants in a much better way. They can express themselves very well, as you can see. So I think the question is, what masteries is this that you're looking at? This is actual output from the session that Andy did. So if you could take a guess on this, this is actually about listening. So of course, the participants that we work with do it differently. They use their eyes, they look at the signing, they read the body language, they read our lips as well. So when we do talk, actually, that's one of the reasons. We also need to face them and talk as normal. They are able to read our lips. So, okay, somehow it skipped our mind, even though we know they can read lips, but they had to remind us, hey, look at this, show your energy, and also so on and so forth.
Yeah, wow. I like when you talk about the power of observation, Neo. I had the privilege of having some of the members of the PDA. One of them is Susie, who I understand was also in your coaching program. I was having an activity, and coincidentally, my class was a combination of deaf community and also other participants. And for one of the reflective question, Susie came out with an observation and answer, which was interpreter shared her observation. It was amazing depth and the insight. So I could relate very well when you mentioned about the power of observation of this member of deaf community. And it was such a wonderful learning experience for me. Lepin, I love to hear your experience, Lepin. Besides being the coach as the lead of the Penang chapter, I'm sure you are involved in many activities before and after the event. So what was your personal outcome, if you may share?
Sure, Prabha. So I think one of it is to be very flexible in the session. So it's over the course of 3 months. So as I usually sit in all the sessions with them. So whenever there's a new trainer coming in, I'll be just discussing with them to say, hey, this is how it has been earlier. So how we can tweak and to adjust to fit to their needs as well. So I think being flexible is really something that we really need to do as we went along throughout the program.
Indeed, indeed. I can see agile project management in practice, yeah, throughout the whole process of getting feedback, adapting. And from your interaction with our friends who were the interpreters, were there any insight that the interpreters shared from this experience, Lepin?
Yeah, I think they also gained a lot because throughout the session, we put them in as a participant as well. So I think there's a question from Denise, and we will talk about how we will do differently later. So for the interpreters, of course, they are also learning a new skill, and they are also practicing it. So when Neo and I tried to follow up after a few months with them, one of the interpreters, she said that she has some success stories that she's sharing in the WhatsApp group as well. So she's also learning to coach other people within the community and to help them to become more solution focused, like you mentioned just now, because instead of telling them what to do or advising them, she's actually asking them, because the coaching has the answers. It's only, everything is muddled in the head, and you just need to help them to put it in a structured manner so that they can move forward and take the action.
Right.
Yeah, Prabha, I like to add to that. When we're talking to the interpreters, so again, shout out to them, because they asked the materials to be made available to them earlier. So they actually have to do pre-work before the whole session started. So they actually did reading before that. Right. So, and I think repeating myself is they are processing. Okay, let me put that in sequence. They have to learn live. Yeah, live as we are sharing with them. They have to do that immediately, process it, then process the interpretation, how to message that to the participants. Right. So that's why I just want to highlight this again. They did a great job. We put a big burden on them. Yeah, so the success of the whole thing actually depended a lot on their efforts to communicate effectively to the participants.
Wonderful, wonderful. I could imagine the coach, the interpreters. I'm sure by now they would have understood quite a bit on the whole coaching process, even though their role were interpreters. But in the process of interpreting, and like what you rightfully said, translating the perspective and presenting it in the way our coaches, in this case, the Penang Deaf Association associates, to understand. So the coach, the interpreters would have wonderful learning experience, I believe.
Yeah, Prabha, sorry.
No problem, please. No problem at all.
I just remembered something. So when we talk about the objective, these interpreters are actually part of the participants. When we started the whole program, we intended that they also could get the certified professional coaching as well. So they're actually playing multi-role at the same time. Can you imagine, right? So that was the intent. And I believe from what Lepin shared, we do have a WhatsApp group with them that helps us communicate. That is helpful for us, right? There's a channel that we can actually effectively communicate. So they do get back with some questions on some coaching sessions that they're trying to carry out. Yeah. So they are doing that. So that's great to hear.
Wonderful, wonderful. And I'm sure many people who are tuned in here from many parts of the world would be interested to know some of the challenges, the difficulties, being the first time doing. I can imagine even organizing for a coaching program for day-to-day event and a structured process. It comes with a lot of challenges. Here we are talking about the member of the deaf community. And involving the association, involving other volunteers like the interpreters. There will be a list of difficulties and challenges that you guys faced. And I believe that is one of the great learning experience. Perhaps, Neo, you like to share what are some of the difficulties throughout this project?
Yeah, sure. I think the first part was in terms of the material wise, right? So we have the right material, then we have to, I think there's some work needed there in terms of fine-tuning the material to cater for the participants, right? So in this case, a lot of concepts are new to them. So this is part of the challenges that we have, right? So getting them using the right terms to help them understand. Then the process of communication itself, I think there is multiple processing happening at the same time, right? From the concept itself, as I mentioned earlier, the interpreters have to process that, translate that. And in the process of coaching as well, when we're doing the live session, as we've seen earlier, actually we have two interpreters all together. So one interpreter will interpret the coachee and one will interpret for the coach so that they can be focused. Sometimes we do not have both of them available and we have to work with one, right? And I don't know, we can't know what gets lost in translation in process. Like you have two interpreters, one with the coach, one with the coachee. So definitely communication is a challenge. The process of translating into sign language, right? And when we talk about the terms, finding the right terms definitely is a challenge as well, right? So that's the from the communication and material perspective.
Right. Can you give some example? For example, the terms you were mentioning, anything specific come to your mind now, Neo?
Okay, let me try to think back. I think it's more on the psychology, right? We have specific terms. Even for us, I can tell you the term, whether you can understand it is another thing, right? So psychodynamics, for example.
Wow.
You ask me to translate into another language, I have no idea. How do I tell in another language, even though I know the language, but I can't tell you, I don't think I have the right word for it, right? So this kind of terms is something that they have to put into context and explain it, understanding the meaning, usage, and so on to be able to sign, I guess. I think we try to understand the process. This is the little that we know as we try to clarify the whole process of interpretation.
Right. Yep. The Lepin, I'm sure, beside being the coach, as I mentioned just now, the person who's organizing it from the both administrative perspective, dealing with the other stakeholders, what are some of the challenges or difficulties that you like to share here?
Sure, just to add on what Neo has mentioned is, I think he mentioned earlier that a lot of them, they are actually new to attending a training because we found out that the educational level is not that high. Some only finish primary school. So, to come to a coaching program is rather challenging for them. So that's where we got to be really flexible and try to, instead of using all those technical terms like psychoanalytic or psychodynamic, we try to put it into a layman term so that they can understand it. Otherwise, they'll be giving you the blank faces. So a lot of times during the training, we decided not to give them so much theory. We give them maybe 5 or 10 minutes of the theory, then we go straight into the practice. So that's what we did. So a lot of changes that went along the way as well. The other one is talking about the interpreter. I know Neo spoke about the interpretation. So sometimes we are also wondering whether the interpretation was done correctly because we also don't know the sign language. And, sometimes I also worry, am I speaking too fast? Because, when they sign, we found out that sometimes they have to sign by alphabets. They actually have to spell out the words. So I really don't know whether they are able to sign as fast as when we speak. So that's also another challenge that I personally find.
Right. I recently read an article which says the sign language differs from country to country. There's a unique, like Malaysian sign language. So having the sign language itself is a challenge. and translating the materials. Would you like to share some perspective about the challenges of adopting the existing materials for these unique coaches? Was there any challenge regarding the materials?
So maybe I can touch a bit on that. I think the plus point is we do have the IAC material already in Bahasa, which is the national language for Malaysia, right? But I think it's about using the terms that the participants can relate to, right? Hence, okay, we did go through, and Lepin and myself, we did discuss on some of it, and we kind of refined some of the words, or just use layman terms in some cases. Some cases we managed to find other words that we thought could relay the message more effectively to the team. So I would say a bit more effort, I guess, in terms of applying across different communities. You may have to take into consideration about this. Plus, in terms of something that we didn't look in depth is in terms of the experience level of the participants, because I think that is critical, because we have to adapt to the participants, right? So that's a challenge that we have to take up. I wouldn't say it's on the participants or interpreter, it's more of us as trainers who are delivering the program, something that we have to consider into consideration as part of the program execution.
Right. You were mentioning about the participants level at the entry level. Lepin did share something about it. Perhaps you can tell me more about what you mean by the participants levels for joining the program. Yeah, Neo.
Maybe I think what Lepin mentioned was some of them, their education level was up to primary. So let me try to put it in a term maybe the others can relate to. So we talk about up to 6 years of basic schooling, yeah, the first 6 years of schooling. I would say how you call it differently in other places. So some have higher, but I would say maybe majority of them have up to that level, some a bit higher. So in terms of their education level, that's what she was referring to earlier. And added to the plus the fact that in terms of their exposure and having opportunities to join trainings in terms of communication skills, understanding psychology, and so on, I would say is pretty limited. Right? So we have to take this into consideration as well when we are looking at the program. So we kind of jump into the program when we started the Penang chapter, because when we were just starting, everybody was excited, the energy was high. I think we adjusted as we went along, but I think the intent was to build this up. And looking at what we see, of course, we didn't get them to be professional coaches, but at least we get them to start doing coaching conversations.
Exactly. I mean, ultimately, in at least my personal opinion, that's what matters. You have empowered them, and then the coaching conversation have started, like what Lepin was saying. Some of the association members have started using the coaching conversation to create more solution-oriented discussion. That's amazing. And when you were using the word experiential learning, I believe it's not only the coaches who are learning, but also the coaches and all the association members and the organizing committee. So with this huge amount of learning, Lepin, if you like to suggest to the other members, I'm sure there are a lot of audience who are thinking. I can see some of the questions that there are people who are interested to understand this more. Either we in Malaysia or in Penang chapter or our friends from any part of the world, if they wanted to explore the opportunity to serve this community, what would you suggest to them, or what would you do differently?
Sure. I think for me, two things I will do differently is the first one is maybe to train the interpreters first, get them through the coaching program separately, get them certified so that they are prepared, they know what it's all about. Then we can co-facilitate with them. So that's the first thing that I would do differently. The second is because we found out along the way about the education level and everything, I would do a detailed audience analysis to find out about their educational level, the interest in the program, and maybe to even select the participants to ensure that they are almost at the same level. It's easier for us to coach or to teach them the coaching program, because this is quite a technical thing to do. And especially if they not have experiences attending even a soft skill training, I think it comes in as quite, I would say, a shock to them in that sense.
Right. And Neo, how about you, Neo? You have shared quite a bit, and what would you suggest differently?
Let me see. Yeah, from the conversation just now, I think we talked a bit about knowing the participants, right? So when we reflected back on this whole program that we did, one thing came to mind was when we do coaching, right? When we have a process of coaching, sometimes we have this process of knowing the coach and the coachee, right? So this is getting to know each other better. How can we blend in? So perhaps we can apply this for even the participants, even though we're not doing a coaching process, right? How can we engage and really understand better so that we can actually adapt, adapt the program upfront rather than adapt as we go along. So perhaps that would be slightly different in terms of how we execute the program. So they've been talking about training the interpreters upfront. Then we could be collaborating with the interpreters to carry out the training, right? So we will have sessions to do it separately with them. That is one possibility. Or the other thing is, if we look at the audience, we have, okay, based on our experience, then we most likely will do the program differently in terms of going to maybe help them build up the fundamentals, right? So that they have the right foundation to get into some of the coaching training. So perhaps we have to look at the modules that we're covering and fill up some of the gaps that we see from our conversations that we should have upfront with them. So I think that process, that having the conversation, understanding the gap, doing the gap analysis, I think this is also similar to what Lepin said. Then, covering some of the modules to make sure we lay the proper foundation for them before we get them in the coaching journey. That could be some possibilities I can think of.
Yeah, wonderful. As what I mentioned, the experiential learning that you guys went through, I can see the outcome of conducting the audience analysis, identify the potential gap, and train the key stakeholder in this entire project, the interpreter, so that both the professional coaches like you guys and the interpreter are on the same page, review the material and whatever the gap there is, and come up with a more comprehensive version 2.0 of a similar project. Wonderful, guys. I'm sure if any of the member of audience who like to know more about this experience, just reach out at IAC. They will know how to get to Lepin and Neo. And once again, Neo and Lepin, it was a wonderful experience listening from you and learning from both of you. Thank you very much. And once again, congratulations for the amazing job. Back to you, Barry. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Prabha. This is the photograph which Leping wanted me to put up, which is of all the participants and the trainers. As you can see, they're all quite pleased with themselves. I'm sure they learned quite a bit. Thank you very much, Prabha and Leping. Let me stop this sharing. Okay. let me see if there's any questions that are outstanding that is different from whatever that has been raised and answered here. The participants was also described here. Who were the participants? Question on the interpreters, on whether they were trained. Yes, that's already been answered. How would you do it differently? That's the main subject that was also raised by Prabha and answered. Okay, there's also one question from a person who is deaf, wanting to know a bit more about this because obviously she could not, or he or she could not hear what was said. I believe IAC will be publishing a script of this session. So the script will come out maybe in a couple of months' time, which will detail some of the points which was raised down here. So if you can wait, the details will come out in script form for you to read. Any closing remarks from Neo and Leping?
Barry, the question comes from Shazi. We do know her. We can definitely get in touch with her and reply to her question. No problem. Small.
You can repeat the whole session again with her in sign language. Yeah. Okay. All right. Lepin, anything else to add?
No, thanks.
Okay.
No. So Barry, if I mean, I think on behalf of the team today, I think I just want to emphasize again and express gratitude to all that were involved. On behalf of our Penang team, Malaysian team, this was a great team effort from the Malaysian team. This is not a Penang team alone. Yes, definitely big clap to everybody. We even have support from Singapore. We couldn't name him just now. In one of the photos, we had a member from Singapore supporting the effort. He came all the way up to Penang to support this. Then again, Captain Shan, Grace, Andy, and all the people who work on the material. As I mentioned, IAC had the material in Bahasa. There was a lot of work. There's a lot of people who put work into that. So we can't name everybody. This is definitely a great team effort. We are humbled by this experience. We are learning from it, and we are thankful that we are given this opportunity to contribute in our own small way. Thank you very much, everyone.
Okay, thank you, Neil, for that. I've been asked to put up this email address. So if anybody would like to contact Neo and Leping for more follow-up questions or details about how to start up your own programs, please write to the IAC with this at this email, membership@certifiedcoach.org, and they will forward it to Neo and Leping, and they will then contact you directly to talk and discuss more about the project. Before we end, I've been asked to show the next details of the next learning circle, and here it is. The objective of this program, the Learning Circle, is to share knowledge, collaborate, and learn from the global community of coaches. The series of webinars championed by chapters across the globe will share experiences, practices, and coaching tools from around the world. We hope that these sessions spark your curiosity, encourage you to reflect, and initiate dialogues with your own, within your coaching community. So the next learning circle, which is IAC Learning Circle number 5, will be held in November the 18th at 8:30 a.m. to 9:30 Eastern Time. The Zoom address will be sent out later, and it will be broadcast live on the IAC Facebook. The theme is the spirit of meaningful transitions, and it will be hosted and conducted by the Canadian chapter. The speakers are listed down here. So I'm sure before too long, posters will be sent out. So this is something to look forward in the future. With that, we come to an end for this IAC Learning Circle number 4. Thank you very much for spending your time with us. And I wish you a good day or good evening wherever you are. Bye-bye.